Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Michael, General Manager of Boise State, member-supported Boise State Public Radio. Thank you for being here. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight. We feature, of course, Heath Druzin, the host and creator of the Murrow Award-winning podcast, Extremely American. That was made in partnership with us, Boise State Public Radio, along with reporter James Dawson. And as you know, it examines the intersection of extremism and mainstream politics. Quick show of hands, who has listened to any of the first two seasons? Amazing. Okay. We also supported Heath on his podcast, Howl, about wolves in the West, working alongside the Idaho Capital's Sun. And, it examined the successes and failures of wolves and how it was such a, resident issue in the West. Quick show of hands, who heard any of that podcast, Howl? Oh, fantastic. And I also see a Yellowstone National Park shirt. So
it's not too late to listen.
Yeah. In addition to Boise State Public Radio, Heath has reported on extremism, politics, and the environment for outlets such as NPR, the BBC, the Daily Beast. Before that, he spent 6 years as a war correspondent in Iraq and Afghanistan for Stars and Stripes newspaper. So Heath is currently working on season 3 of Extremely American. And I wanted to say thank you for those, many of you who paid an entry fee today. And projects like this are kind of outside the regular budget. So you can find out more and help out at extremelyamerican.org. And I think this QR code will take you right to. You can find out more about this season 3 and the work he's doing. But now, please join your hands together to welcome Heath Druzin.
Thanks so much, everybody. I'm kind of blown away by the crowd here, and I know some people, it sounds like, couldn't get in because we ran out of seats. So thank you very much. And I know, a big part of this is going to be answering your questions, and we're going to do that. But this is also, as Tom mentioned, also a fundraiser for season 3, which we're working on right now. We're kind of building the plane as we fly it. So I wanted to just play you a trailer for season 3, just give you a little sneak peek with hopefully a photo slideshow if I do this right. And then we'll dive into the presentation.
These people are extremely dangerous, whether it's murder, robbery, or whatever. It's get the intent is to visit their cause, and they kill the cause.
So that's Carousel set out on a mission to ignite a race war.
The fate of every last white man, woman, and child on this planet lies squarely on the shoulders of us. We cannot fail.
Stronghold in Idaho.
Well, incredible trailer, Heath.
On that happy note,
You're right. So I get to start the questions, but this is such a big room. We really want to hear from you. Um, I'm thinking back, Heath, one of your first roles when you joined Boise State Public Radio back in 2018 was for a short-term project around gun policy and gun culture. And what I saw from you then, especially as you transitioned from a print reporter into such a successful audio journalist, was how well you managed spaces that some might find, extremist. So I guess we should start with that, a definition, as we talk about it tonight. How do you define extremism?
right. And that's definitely a lot of people probably disagree, especially on the details. One person's extremist is another person's political hero. But when I'm talking about extremist groups, I'm thinking about people who are, I used to think of it more as people outside of the mainstream of politics. I think that's gotten muddied a little bit as extremism has sort of seeped into mainstream politics here. But it's really movements that are trying to fundamentally change the way American democracy works. I think that's a marker of extremism. And certainly not all the groups that I talk to are violent. In fact, most of the people I've talked to have not committed violence. But groups that advocate for violence, right there, I would say clearly an extremist group. But really fundamentally trying to change the way American democracy works. And I would say also if you're, trying to take rights away from people, trying to disenfranchise people, certainly last season talked a lot about taking the right to vote away from women. Those kinds of things, I think, then tip into extremism. That's not just, and extremism can be left or right. I've focused a lot on far right movements, but certainly there's extremism on the left too. The far right's just, frankly, been much more effective in politics and mattered a lot more in recent years in America, and so I've tended to focus on groups that I think matter.
Great. When I go back to think about 2018, when Heath first started working with us, let's see, 2018, there were Nazis marching in the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia. Our reporting team, Boise State Public Radio, had just put out The Legacy of Hate, and they looked at extremism here in Idaho. In addition to other unusual things about Idaho, the culture of the Confederates that came here way back in the day, and the culture that they brought, obviously Ruby Ridge, Aryan Nation. Could you give us kind of a short history of extremism here in Idaho?
Yeah, I mean, Idaho's been fertile ground for extremism for a long time. We even, for those of you who know a little Idaho history, I mean, there was an ex-governor who was assassinated with a bomb on his gate. And that was all, the sort of labor wars back in the late 19th, early 20th century. So it's not new, but I would say Idaho's really become more of a magnet since the late 70s, 80s. And obviously the Aryan nations moved in. They became a real blight on North Idaho for a number of years. And the militia movement is at a stronghold here. And the American Redoubt, which is kind of connected to the militia movement, but its own kind of thing, where a lot of folks moved here to, go off the grid and live in remote places and do their own thing. And the politics of that have gone pretty far right. And I think, I think Idaho's become a magnet partly because there's a lot of space. You can go be alone and be left alone to do your own thing. There's kind of a live and let live attitude in a lot of rural Idaho, which, that's not a bad thing. And I think a lot of people just know that they can, they can do their own thing and not be bothered by neighbors or maybe more importantly, the authorities. Um, so, and then, yeah, obviously more recently, we've had sort of militia movement 2.0, which I covered in the first season, where I think you've had a much more politically savvy militia movement. They weren't content to just, shoot guns in the woods. That's part of the reason I started covering them because I started seeing them in the state house. And I think you started to see that change. You started to see that change, maybe after 2010, and then it really got supercharged during COVID. COVID really brought a lot of extremist groups together. I haven't really discussed, the anti-vax movement much, but there was a lot of connections between militia members and the anti-vax movement, and that really solidified during COVID. And that's another movement that's also had a stronghold in Idaho too. So yeah, there's something in the water, but I think it's more just look, this is a place where you can be left alone and where you can have a big impact on a small population. We're only 2 million people, growing fast, but it's easier to affect change in a place like Idaho than it is in a place like California or take a more conservative state like Texas. There's just too many people there to really affect change quickly.
Just some quick follow-up. Not everyone in the room knows American Readout. How would you describe that or define it?
Yeah, that's sort of a survivalist prepper movement. A lot of folks have moved to North Idaho, especially to live off grid. And there's a lot of anti-government sentiments among them. They call it the American Readout, as in, I think if I remember right, it's a Swiss word that basically is like fortress. Um, and so they see North Idaho and Eastern Oregon, Eastern Washington, parts of Montana and Wyoming as this sort of theoretical fortress against a country gone crazy and an overbearing government where you can kind of make your own. I called it the 51st state in my podcast, where you can carve out your own kind of place, both in America, but also separate from it. And that comes with it, yeah, a lot of pretty far right ideology. There's quite a lot of fundamentalism within the American Readout movement, but it's a loose conglomeration. It's a lot of rugged individualists who don't always agree with each other and aren't always very good at getting together on issues. So it's a mixed bag.
Yeah. With technology today, really, like you're a reporter, you could easily connect with somebody on the phone and record their voice. But investigative work or this enterprise work is a phrase that we use in media. Why is it important for you to fly to Hayden Lakes, fly to Kentucky, fly to, trek through Yellowstone National Park, go to Moscow, go to Chicago? Why tell the story that way?
Yeah, it's important because you can do reporting remotely, but aside from really liking to get paid to go to Yellowstone National Park, I do really believe in the importance of being there. We can't be everywhere all the time as reporters. I can't do these interviews 100% in person because there's just not time and the money for that. But I think experiencing these places and the people that I'm talking about in person and talking to them face to face, it's different than calling them on the phone.
So 5 hours with Doug Wilson across from his desk. Where does that, as a reporter, does that get you to a new place?
Yeah, I think it does. And I see how he's reacting to me. He sees how I'm reacting to him. I see the guitar in his office and, the photos on his wall. Oh, you went to Scotland. That's interesting. What's up with Scotland? He's really into Scotland. That's a whole thing. I learn things, and I think the audience learns things. And I like to take listeners with me. I think that's really important because a podcast in its best form is really like it's an audio book. It's an audio book and an audio movie in one. And I want you to hear and feel the places I'm going to. And I want you to feel the tension too. There's a lot of tension in these interviews. And I think it's just not the same tension as there would be if we weren't face to face. And I think that's important. And yeah, I mean, in the case of, you mentioned Kentucky, we went to a Christian nationalist festival and we were at the Creation Museum, and a 500-foot replica of Noah's Ark, complete with, animatronic animals, dinosaurs, biblical figures, you name it. And so, we took you there with us, and I think that really makes it an immersive experience.
I know we're going to get to your questions in a moment. I think there's everyone got a card and a pen, so we're definitely going to spend a lot of time with that. It's funny how we learn history. We think of certain time periods, like, for example, and no spoilers on your next season, but thinking about white supremacists, or let's say Nazis marching outside of Chicago in the 1970s, or in North Idaho in the 1990s, we often think of these things as, oh, that was a weird period. But you, in your reporting, look at these through lines that connect these. So what do you want us to know about that? It seems like events might pop up and then recede back into time, but you find that's not the case.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and it's really important for the season that I'm working on right now. I love a good history podcast. Don't get me wrong. I really do. But for me, it's always more powerful when you can connect that history to today. And so that's what I try to do. I try to look for historical events that in and of themselves are great stories, but are important in surprising ways to today. And so the season I'm working on definitely is that. Yeah, there's a lot of history there that's 40 years old. And as I started pulling the string on the story, I realized that so much of that actually was directly connected to today, not just sort of hey, things are kind of repeating themselves. There's that too, but direct connections from the people and the actions that happened 40 years ago to today. And so yeah, when you can make history relevant to people's lives right now, I do think that's the most powerful way to tell it.
This will probably come out in some of your questions, but the threads to mainstream politics today. What are you watching in politics today?
Yeah, I mean, that's what started me down this road. As I said, I saw militia members in the Capitol. I saw Ammon Bundy, who a lot of you are probably familiar with, kind of gaining a following. And so I did a lot of that work at Boise State Public Radio when we were doing this 2-year project called Guns in America. And then I had a lot more to say when the project ended. So that went to season 1 of Extremely American, about militia groups and their rising influence. And what's happened is I was going to do that as a one-off and then go do whatever was next. And here I am still doing it. I think we're 5 years later now. Because yeah, extremism, I think, has continued to kind of merge with mainstream politics. I think it's ebbed and flowed as far as where it's been influential. And that's been kind of interesting. You don't hear as much from the militia movement today. And in a weird way, I feel like they've got a fairly friendly administration, and they don't have as much of an adversary. And I think that movement in particular needs an enemy. Not that they've gone away. I mean, they're still around and they still matter. But Christian nationalism, the last season, I do think that movement has gained a lot of power. They've really got a seat at the table at the White House now. And since season 2 ended, obviously Donald Trump won the election. You might have heard. And Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, has a direct connection to Doug Wilson. He's been going to one of his sister churches for a long time, sending his kids to a school in Doug Wilson's school association. And of course, Doug Wilson opened a church in DC, a stone's throw from Capitol Hill after the election, and was promptly invited to give a prayer at the Pentagon. So, yes, that movement, I would say, has more power than it's had, or more influence certainly than it's had in a lot of time, and people in high places.
We call these AMAs Ask Me Another. I think, Bethany Parker, I think we're ready to hear from audience questions too. But so I'm going to close my last one, which is, okay, anecdotally, you're telling these incredible stories about these, you know, and even bringing it up to today. But what do the stats bear out? I mean, is there a rise in extremism here in the U.S. at this moment in 2026?
So it's a little, I mean, it's a little hard to say for sure. Is there a rise? I would say what has definitely been true is that extremism has had more influence in mainstream politics. Things that would make you a pariah just 10 years ago, you know, are treated a lot more seriously now. I mean, Doug Wilson is a good example. I know we talk about him a lot, but him and every ally of his I talk to, they want women to not be guaranteed the right to vote. So you're disenfranchising half of the country there. That, I mean, that would make you a complete fringe outsider. Really recently, well, he just gave a prayer at the Pentagon, and the guy who runs the largest department of the federal government says he really admires Doug Wilson and that his writings influenced him a lot. So I think that kind of thing shows you that they have grown in influence. There's a Pew poll showing attitudes about Christian nationalism. They are the minority, and and you know, the vast majority of Americans reject those ideas. But I think you've got something like 11% of people consider themselves or agree with Christian nationalism. And then you've got this sort of kind of nebulous group of about a third that are open to it. So yeah, I mean, you know, that is significant. It's a minority, but it's a significant number of people. I will also say, though, extremism can seem like more popular than it is. I think it's actually quite unpopular. And even though you see people with extremist views winning primaries, and in states like Idaho, where the primary kind of is the election in a lot of places, they will end up getting seats. You've also seen some general election results that say extremism is actually not a great it's not great at the ballot box when you have a competitive election. And even in Idaho, you've seen mixed results. This last primary we had, there was a whole bunch of far-right candidates that lost. There were some other ones that won. It was a mixed bag. But you have seen that rejected in a lot of places too. So I want to be clear that it's not like, oh, like extremism has taken over, it is finished. Like, they have won the day, because I don't think that's true at all. And certainly they've lost ground in some places and gained some in others.
Yeah. So I think we'll get some of your questions. Are we going to pick up the cards, or yeah, here we go. Let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, actually,
So besides us, is there another demographic listening? Or what's the resistance on this? Where's the resistance? And how much money do they have? How much commercial do they own? This question is, what kind of coalesced military might in this 54th state could they amass? So that was my three questions.
Okay, I wasn't keeping up with you there. I'll be honest. I was switching the mic. So can you ask that very quickly?
Okay, so I wanted to know in the 51st state, militarily wise speaking, how much could they really put together?
Okay.
And then who's the resistance to the white nationalist extremist movement? And then the third question was the demographic. Does anybody other than us graybeards, and I see a few young people, but is anybody other than us listening to this?
Okay. Militarily, I mean, in the American Readout, he's asking, which I was talking about, this sort of survivalist movement. I mean, everybody's got a lot of guns up there. Some of them can use them, and some of them probably not so well. I don't know that they've got an army. Who's fighting back? I mean, a lot of people are fighting back. As I said, in Idaho, there's a lot of moderate Republicans, for example, who are pretty alarmed by the extremism among more far-right candidates. They've had a pretty organized effort, mixed results, but yeah, you've seen that politically. And I think you've seen a lot of people of all ages who have pushed back against extremism. You've seen that up in North Idaho with people pushing back against some people with some really racist and anti-Semitic ideas who have filtered in over the last few years. And you've seen people across the age spectrum and across the political spectrum as well. So, yeah. And I mean, Tom mentioned Charlottesville. That was a protest organized by a bunch of white supremacists. And there was a huge counter protest. Unfortunately, it ended in murder. A neo-Nazi ran over Heather Heyer and killed her. And yeah, but I think my mic went off. No, it's back on. Oh, no. Okay. Well.
They're pushing button over there.
Right. Okay. If I was a conspiracy theorist, yes. So anyway, but let's get to more quick. Well, let me just check.
They had questions.
What's that?
They're right there on your desk.
Oh, I didn't know I had questions there. Okay.
Yes.
God.
Sorry, they didn't tell you.
Okay, we got a lot of questions. To what extent do government failings, policies, etc., irritate people? No. Yeah, please.
That on both sides of the aisle, right? People are frustrated
Yeah.
with our government not working for us. To what extent does that impact people to entertain this?
Right. Okay, good question. I actually somehow haven't got that one before. So very, very good. Yeah, like how do government failures, how does that factor into people gravitating towards extremism? A lot. Yeah. I mean, whatever your politics are, I think everybody has dealt with the shortcomings of government. I think that's been a huge thing. And, when you look at the far right, the militia movement, Ruby Ridge, and Waco were two huge events that really got a lot of people interested in those movements. And I think most people would agree that the government made a ton of mistakes in both of those cases. And yeah, frustration with the government. Yeah. I mean, you certainly don't find people in anti-government movements who aren't frustrated with that. And that's true on the left too, right? I mean, like, if you go to Portland and ask your average Antifa member if they think the government's doing a great job, probably going to say no. So yes. What charter schools in the Treasure Valley are based on Doug Wilson's curriculum? And the one in Avamore. I'm pretty sure the one in Avamore is part of I think the one in Avamore, I don't know if it's open yet or not. But I think that is part of Doug Wilson's school association. I'm looking to my co-reporter Jimmy. Okay. Right. This is about charter schools, and I think maybe there's a conflation here between that and well, I don't know. So I'm not quite sure, to be honest. I don't have that in front of me. I know there's at least one school in the valley, in the Treasure Valley, right? Ambrose, that is part of Doug Wilson's. Is that a charter? I'm not sure. Oh, it is. Okay. Oh, it's private. I think that's a private school. So okay. I'm not, this is double-sided. I'm gonna stick with that one because there's a lot of questions. So I appreciate your enthusiasm. I just want to get to as many as I can. Can everybody hear me okay? This is okay.
It should be bent forward towards your face. Does it bend? It won't stay.
It won't stay. My ears are too small. What's that? Put on the other ear? What's that? Okay. If you guys can hear me okay, then it's fine. Okay. The Southern Poverty Law Center was so instrumental in dismantling Richard Butler, the Aryan Nations. Can you talk more about the active movement that is working to end its important work? I think you're talking about the government movement. Yeah, I mean, there's a criminal case against the Southern Poverty Law Center, and somebody just got arrested the other day. I don't know if it's yesterday or the day before. Yeah, I mean, the federal government is basically saying that the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a longtime organization that's advocated against hate and done some undercover operations, things like that, that they were somehow like helping hate groups and defrauding people who were donating to them. Yeah, I mean, that's what's happening. I don't know. I haven't seen a ton of evidence that the Southern Poverty Law Center was doing anything other than combating hate. But yeah, it's an ongoing case, and then pretty sure that was their first arrest. So I think we'll see where it goes from there. How do you see the infusion of extremism, religion, and the homeschool movement? Oh, okay, the intersection. Sorry. That's my reading skills there. There's a big intersection. Homeschooling, yeah, but not every homeschooler is, let me be clear, like not every homeschooler is part of an extremist movement by any stretch. But homeschooling is big in Christian nationalism, especially. Doug Wilson's Canon Publishing, they've got a whole like sort of homeschool in a box curriculum you can buy. That's big business. Certainly, yeah. I mean, a big part of a lot of Christian nationalist movements is real disdain for the public school system, to the point where, I mean, Doug Wilson thinks that that's the root of a lot of what he sees as societal decay. And he's told me, he wants the public school system to be blown up. And he's happy to be part of that. So, yeah, and homeschooling's part of that. In Doug Wilson's case, I think he'd rather have people migrate to fundamentalist schools like his. But homeschooling is definitely part of that. What brings you hope? I usually take this at the end, but I'll take it now. Well, I mean, I have a 4-year-old daughter, so I get a lot of hope and happiness from her. And, I don't know. I deal in dark subjects, but I'm pretty optimistic. And yeah, we're still a democracy. We've all got agency here. We all get to vote. So I don't think, nothing's written in stone. Things are changing, ebbing and flowing. Yeah, I actually have a lot of hope, weirdly enough. This is a thank you to BSPR and me. Thank you for the thank you. Let's see. How much influence do these groups have on education standards and the dismantling of education? How many PACs, political action committees, do the extremist groups have? I don't know the answer to that second question. I don't really closely follow who's opening political action committees all the time. But I would say these groups are having more and more influence, especially in conservative states, on education. You've seen things like PragerU, which is kind of a far right education outfit. I think Florida adopted some of their stuff. And you're seeing groups like the Idaho Family Policy Center, which is pretty dominated by Christian nationalists. You're seeing them have more influence in the state house, and education is a big priority of theirs. So yeah, no, I think that is definitely a huge fight going on. Why do Christian nationalists need guns? I mean, to be fair, we live in Idaho, and a lot of people have guns here, and most of them aren't Christian nationalists. So, why does anybody need guns? I mean, I hunt, not very well, but yeah, I mean, Christian nationalists would say, I've heard, and I'm going to fail to give you to remember the exact biblical reference, but I've heard some biblical references on basically saying why you should be armed as a Christian man, especially, and usually it is man. And yeah, I mean, Christian nationalists don't trust the government. There's a lot of crossover there, belief-wise, with militia members and the American Redoubt. So, can you give the derivation? The derivation of the name Secesh River. So I think I looked this up once, and I'm pretty sure that is actually one of our Confederate Idaho names, as in secession. It is. Okay. Yeah. We also have a Dixie. We have Atlanta. Apparently, the story with Atlanta is a bunch of Confederate soldiers got the wrong news that the Union had been crushed in a battle in Atlanta. But yeah, there's a lot of old Confederate names in Idaho. How are city leaders? And residents in Moscow reacting to the actions and land purchases? Yeah. Jimmy and I got into that in season 2. If you haven't listened, it's free. There's a huge fight in Moscow. And it's pretty fascinating to walk the, I think, 6 block downtown, and like Kirkers are walking here and the lefties are walking here, and they're all like right on top of each other. To be clear, though, the national media kind of messes us up sometimes, not to bash my my national colleagues, but Doug Wilson has not taken over Moscow. It's still a blue dot in Idaho. But he and his allies have certainly bought a lot of land there, and they have a big footprint, and they're very visible. And a lot of people in Moscow are very nervous, and they even have a whole sort of like boycott list of like businesses that are Kirkers or Kirker allies. Kirkers are what they call Christchurch people call themselves. So yes, they're very concerned.
Let's tack on to that. What's happening in Troy?
What's happening in Troy with the lawsuit? Ooh, boy. You put me on the spot here because That's a good question. There's a tiny town near Moscow called Troy, and there's been a big fight. Troy didn't want Christchurch to have services in a particular building there. The Justice Department has sued on their behalf, and I don't know that there's been an outcome yet. I don't know if that's been resolved. Yeah.
But the Justice Department had to get involved.
The Justice Department was suing the city of Troy for violating the religious freedom of Christchurch. So yeah. But I'd have to check and whether that's been resolved or not, because I've been deep in this next season. To be honest, I haven't followed up recently. Talk about the impact of Ruby Ridge. Did it exacerbate or embolden extremists? Yes. Yes. Ruby Ridge was a seminal moment that radicalized a lot of people. And I mean, frankly, Randy Weaver, he was the patriarch of the family that was involved. There was a big standoff. An FBI sniper shot his wife while she was holding their infant daughter. His son, I think it was a marshal who killed his son, and his son killed a marshal. It was a big mess. Randy Weaver was a problematic character, white supremacist, Christian identity guy. But I think very few people would say that the outcome there was justified. It was ugly. And a lot of people saw that as well, you better go do your own thing and get armed because the government might come and kill you too. That was big. That and Waco.
Heath, we're going to help you ask the questions so you can.
Oh, okay.
Why don't we do it that way?
Great.
And then I also
Here, let me do the ones that were.
I also brought in reporter James Dawson here for backup.
Okay.
Okay.
Here, take this too.
Great.
And then
these aren't. Okay, I've got one for you right here.
yes.
Is Ruby Ridge still relevant, or is it forgotten among those in the movement? Is the question.
So yeah, well, I mean, that's basically what we just talked about. So
Oh, sorry,
yeah,
I missed that.
no, that's okay.
No.
I mean, the new thing there was, is it still relevant today? Yes, I don't think it's as relevant as it was 20, 30 years ago, but people still talk about Ruby Ridge for sure.
Let's see. What do you think will be the proverbial straw that will get lawmakers to pass any kind of gun control laws in Idaho? Specifically because this person says they're an educator, it's clear that their life and the lives of their students aren't worth making any kind of change.
So I don't want to make light of that because it's a serious question, but I would put your hopes in a different basket. It's just, to be honest, I think we've seen over and over again. I mean, mass murder doesn't move the needle in the country, and it certainly hasn't seemed to move the needle in Idaho on gun control. So I would be shocked to see a gun control measure in Idaho. A few years ago, I would say maybe a red flag law, where a mentally unstable person can have their guns taken away. Could have happened in Idaho, but I think we're past the point of that being a possibility. It's just too politically toxic for people here.
Heath, what are your thoughts on Idaho license plates, which now have slogans like "Appeal to Heaven" and "Don't Tread on Me," which some might find as extremist? What does this mean to you? How do you see it?
I mean, "Appeal to Heaven" certainly is a really popular one among extremists. "Don't Tread on Me" is also, although maybe a little more mainstream far right. They're both also historic. I mean, those are real things from history. So yeah, I mean, I'm not really here to sort of give my opinion on those license plates, but they are certainly indicators often of a certain belief system. And I'd say the "Appeal to Heaven" one even kind of more so. Also, Samuel Alito's wife flew that. That was a bit controversy. So yeah, but I mean, I think we've seen Idaho politics reflected in some of the more recent license plates.
This one says that they have two friends who've gone down the rabbit holes of extremism, specifically religious, political, Holocaust denial. They're wondering, is there any way to sort of guide them away from this sort of worldview?
To guide believers of that away from the worldview? Whew. I feel like that is above my pay grade, and there's much smarter people in sociology who could tell you that. So I don't have a great answer for that. I will say, I mean, the approach I take, because I talk to people who I'm not Christian, and I talk to people who think that I should lose rights because of my belief system. I talk to people obviously who think my wife and my daughter should lose rights because they're women. And so my approach is I always want to hear people out and like learn about their views. Doesn't mean I agree with them. It doesn't mean I'm adopting their views by any stretch, and it doesn't mean I'm endorsing it. But I do think it really helps to just listen to people and like see where it's coming from. I mean, it gets trickier on the farther like really racist, anti-Semitic fringes. But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to. Yeah, having a conversation about that and learning about where it comes from helps.
Heath, what types of organizations are considered left-wing extremist? And the questioner wants us to know it's by moderate citizens, not especially by right-wing groups. So what would be considered a left-wing extremist?
I mean, I mentioned Antifa, and sometimes that's a boogeyman, especially here. Like we've been waiting for the Antifa bus to pull up for like a decade now, and just never has showed up. And it's kind of less. It's less a group than an ideology. It's a real thing in Europe. My wife is German. We spend a lot of time there, and like that's a much more organized thing there. So it's not made up by any stretch. But I mean, you do see people in Portland and Seattle, especially, who cause violence and kind of riot in the streets. So yeah, I mean that it's a real left-wing group, often exaggerated in its impact. You certainly saw in the in the early 2000s, 90s, early 2000s, you saw in some environmental terrorism in the U.S. I would definitely put that in the extremism category. Those people were planting bombs and burning down buildings. So yeah, I mean, that would be the major one, the major ones. There's just not a lot right now, but there has been in the past, right? There's been groups, the Weather Underground, I mean, they caused a lot of violence. And yeah, I mean, you can name a number of groups, especially in the 60s, 70s, who killed people, bomb places. We have a history of that. There's no question. The left ones too. Yeah. No, it's good to be realistic about that. I mean, yeah, there's left-wing terrorism. That's a fact.
So did your war reporting experience affect your work on Extremely American, and if so, how?
Yeah, it did. I mean, my war experience definitely sort of just impacted my outlook in general. But I talked to a lot of extremists in Iraq and Afghanistan. Different kinds, but I mean, I had the Taliban spokesman on speed dial, and we had a lot of conversations. I never met him in person, but and it was a him. Yeah.
Was he one of the ones who wore eyeliner? You mentioned that a lot of Taliban loved wearing eyeliner.
Yeah, Cole. Yeah, Cole. They would rub charcoal. I don't know because I never met him in person. He didn't go out in public much for obvious reasons. But I think talking to people with such wildly different worldviews than me, I think that really helped me helped me do that here. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that it helped me talk to people on the fringes because I was doing it in such a sort of extreme scenario there. And
I've
yeah.
got another question about your craft here. They ask, as you've researched extremism and Christian nationalism, have you found any of your own opinions and beliefs about these topics have changed or revised over time?
I think talking to people with these views, I think it just helps me sort of, I guess, look at things I take for granted and say, okay, like why do I think this? Why is this? Things that I might not have thought about. Yeah, I don't think it's changed my fundamental outlook. It hasn't changed my fundamental outlook, but yeah, it's good to re-examine all of your assumptions. And I think this work helps you do that because you got to hear people out. Again, it doesn't mean you're like, oh yeah, I think women shouldn't have the right to vote, but it's like, why do you think this? Like, take me through your thought process. And that I think helps you sort of critically evaluate more things that you wouldn't think about.
We mentioned the city of Moscow itself and kind of the citizens. How are they pushing back against Christchurch? But has the University of Idaho, another big pillar of that community, been influenced by Doug Wilson? And if so, how?
Oh man, that would be a great question for the professor Jimmy and I talked to. It seems like no, although it seems like University of Idaho kind of tries to keep their distance from like criticizing or embracing, which is sort of, I guess, understandable. I mean, it's a public university. I know Doug Wilson has, I think he's had debates there, and yeah, it seems like University of Idaho has been sort of studiously neutral.
Yeah, I would agree with
And
that.
Jimmy knows more. Jimmy knows more about
Yeah,
that.
I would say that that's pretty much how they view things. They have their own set of problems happening, whether it's with the state legislature or otherwise, but they rightfully and wrongly have their own sort of kerfuffle going on internally. But I mean, several Christchurch members are students or have been students. They're alumni.
And Doug Wilson, a philosophy
himself.
Graduate.
Exactly.
Of University of Idaho.
Steven Sittler, the serial pedophile that we had in one of our episodes,
right.
He, I think, got his engineering degree.
Okay.
At least he was taking engineering classes and had won an award that we had found. But
right. Yeah, a lot of connections.
Here's an interesting question. They ask, have you uncovered any evidence that organized extremism, like Christian nationalism, has influence on the military? And the same question in regard to national and local law enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of issues with, there's been a lot of issues with extremism in the military. Certainly,
there was an issue about the tattoos as well at one point.
Right, and Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, has some questionable tattoos as well that he's been criticized for. And I think he was denied a National Guard deployment at one point because of his tattoos. Yeah, no, extremism has been a big problem. White supremacism in the military for sure. A lot of it's more the real hardcore neo-Nazi white power groups. They like to get members into the military to get training, because the militant groups, they want their members to have that training, and the military is a great way to do it because they actually pay you for it. And they have the guns. You don't have to buy them. So yeah, I mean, that's been an ongoing problem, and we've seen, different administrations take it seriously and not. And this administration, definitely not as much.
Law enforcement culture in Idaho attract extremists?
He asked if law enforcement culture in Idaho attracts extremists. I don't know if I'd say that. I think there's been some issues with people in law enforcement having those views. I haven't seen evidence of organized effort to promote those ideas by any stretch.
What I mean, like within the culture, there tends to be there's a lot of, blue lives matter.
Well,
is that considered extremism in any capacity?
I mean, I'm sure you can find people in this room who would say yes. That's not really something that I'd say is an extremist movement. Yeah, I don't know enough about the internal workings of law enforcement to say whether or not that fosters those views, to be honest.
This is another sort of what can we do about it question. Specifically kind of about undue influence. How do people kind of combat that wherever they might see it? They brought up a couple examples of, how was McCarthyism defanged in the 50s to accomplish improvements in politics and culture, as well as, the strength of the KKK in the 20s through 50s, kind of setting up the stage for civil rights movement.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not here to tell you how to be an activist or defeat a movement. That's not what I do. But in terms of the KKK, I mean, well, the KKK had a lot of actual law enforcement action against them. That I'm not an expert in the KKK history, so but. McCarthyism, yeah, I mean McCarthy was a horrible alcoholic and died really young, which that helped end it, but he certainly did a lot of damage along the way. But yeah, I mean there were some key politicians who stood up against him. But yeah, I mean how do these movements end? I mean I think people stand up against them, and you see law enforcement action when there is illegal activity makes a big difference.
Oh,
yes.
No, this was a similar question.
Oh, sorry, can you pat the water?
Oh,
just so that's okay.
I didn't know what you were pointing at.
Thank you very much.
Similar question here is the one Jimmy just asked about, is there a playbook? But also a recommendation. Chris Jennings' book on Ruby Ridge gives fascinating history of the problem. Recommend the book. The magnitude of the movement is an eye-opener. It's a long history. Chris Jennings. And someone asks, what is the ethnicity breakdown of Christian nationalism? Like, for example, white, black, Hispanic?
It's a good question. Well, I think there's a lot of people who are assuming that it's all white, which it is not. I don't have a demographic breakdown. Jimmy and I went to Kentucky to this festival, and I guess you could call that a decent sample. I think there was 1,000 people there. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's largely white, but there are plenty of non-white members and some prominent ones. It's complicated. Like these movements, these groups. I know there's a tendency to want to just move them all into one box, but there's a lot of nuance there. The co-host of Christchurch, the Christchurch Universe basically has a politics show called Cross Politic, and it's one of their biggest media efforts. And the co-host of that is black. I mean, and he's a really active member in the movement. And yeah, I mean, and that's not as unusual as you might think. So
I think we saw several Hispanic families.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
Leader of the Proud Boys.
Leader of the Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio, right? He's Afro-Cuban. I mean, well, not the leader anymore after he went to prison, but super prominent guy on the far right, and not white. So
thought this was a very interesting question. This Monday's episode of Fresh Air, if you caught it, it's still on my list to listen to, but there was an author journalist who was interviewed and argued that this small circle of Silicon Valley billionaires and venture capitalists are basically concluding that democracy is over, and we as these rich and powerful people should convert it to an autocracy instead. What is it? The Nerd Reich? Yeah, that is the title. So I mean, have you run
wish I
across...
would have thought of that. That's pretty good.
I mean, and especially because you have ties to the Bay Area. Have you come across this form of extremism, in your reporting or daily life?
Peter Thiel doesn't let me get close enough to ask him a question, so I haven't, not face to face, but yeah, I mean, a lot of these guys haven't done anything to dispel that myth. I think you've heard a lot of dim views on democracy from people like Peter Thiel. And yeah, I grew up in the Bay Area. That was what Jimmy was referring to. So I do think that there's a lot of powerful people in tech who have certainly not given signals that are super pro-democracy, and that is definitely something to watch because they have a lot of resources.
So Heath, the question is about the different Christian nationalist extremist groups. Do they have feuds amongst each other, have criticisms of each other? And if so, about what? What do they fight over?
Yeah, some of them hate each other. And that's important to know. And that's true with a lot of these movements you're talking about. These guys are not all the same. They have different views. Right now, there's a huge split in Christian nationalism between people who have gone super hard, like racist, anti-Semitic right, and the more moderate fundamentalists like Doug Wilson, which it's weird to say. It's a moderate extremism, I guess, if that works. So it's true though. Nick Fuentes is a name a lot of you might know. Speaking of folks, he's got Mexican heritage too, and he's like the leading neo-Nazi in America. So yeah, we're a weird, confusing country, but he is also a Christian nationalist. He's in a different vein. He's a kind of a traditionalist Catholic, but he is openly racist, anti-Semitic, and him and the Doug Wilson school, they fight a lot online. There's kind of open warfare going on. There's a preacher we talked to in season 2 named Joel Webbin out of Texas. He wasn't sort of publicly this way when we talked to him. He really changed fast, but he is, praising Hitler, like just openly anti-Semitic now, saying some really awful racist things, and having Nick Fuentes on talking to him. And he was on stage with Doug Wilson when we were there, and they are just openly feuding now. And yeah, that's a big split right now. It's sort of the openly racist or just want to disenfranchise women. That's kind of, yeah.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, like explore this a little bit, because isn't it kind of like, oh, we're the optimists, the Doug Wilson crowd, we're the optimists, and they're like the pessimists, or the black-pilled, if you want to use like subculture online,
Yes.
terminology.
No, that's true. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and black-pilled is like these guys who are just sort of openly bigoted. They say they've been black-pilled. It's like more than red-pilled. Yeah, that is kind of what they say. Doug Wilson would say these guys, like Nick Fuentes, have lost the plot and are just like, giving up on some of the things in America that Doug Wilson is still, I guess, supportive of. Yeah, it's a weird split, but it's something to keep an eye on. It's alarming because the side, the kind of Holocaust denying racist right, that does seem to be growing, especially among young men. They've got a message that unfortunately is resonating.
I like the way that this was phrased. Ammon Bundy wrote an anti-ICE opinion piece recently. What is that about?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. People are complicated, and when you kind of flatten out the views, you can miss a lot. Ammon Bundy's always been that way. I've talked to Ammon Bundy a lot, not since he went on the lam, but although he seems very reachable in Utah.
Got his address if you need it.
There you go. Hiding in plain sight. But no, I mean, Ammon Bundy said a number of things several years ago when Black Lives Matter, when those protests broke out. He really was pretty critical of the right, saying, why are you guys so worried about Black Lives Matter? You should be more worried about the authorities. And he got a lot of crap for that, as you might imagine, from the right. So that doesn't surprise me one bit. Ammon Bundy is many things, but he is pretty consistently anti-government. And for him, that includes just about every form of it. And yeah, I'm not surprised that he's not into ICE.
Question, might AI exacerbate extremism in the next 5 to 10 years? How might that work?
Yeah, probably. I mean, we've had some examples of AI going kind of like full Hitler when you unleash it. And yeah, I worry a lot about that. I'm not an AI expert, so I don't, I don't have super smart things to say about that. But I do think that could be something that really plays a role.
We've gotten this a couple times, but do you think that you could have a woman with you interviewing Doug Wilson?
Well, I mean, that's happened. Yeah, no, for sure. He sat down and he sat down and done interviews with women. So yeah, that's an easy yes. Yeah, he was polite. Yeah. No, I mean, Doug Wilson's smart. You don't underestimate him. He's a savvy guy. I mean, he knows if he just like sits down with a reporter with a microphone or a camera on and is rude and dismissive and angry, that's probably not going to work very well for him. Doug Wilson has a lot of ideas, but and a lot of very fundamentalist ideas, but he also wants to win. He's not just there to make a point. He wants to win, and he's been doing a pretty good job.
I've got one. Stop me if this was asked, but it seems like Christian nationalist modus operandi, is the threat of violence to stifle resistance. Please comment.
I mean, if we're talking about the Doug Wilson world, I have not seen threats of violence. It's certainly like taking away your fundamental constitutional rights because of who you are is a threat of something very serious, but I haven't seen threats of violence. The Nick Fuentes side of things, Joel Webben, that more fringe, like openly racist, right? There I've seen a lot more violent talk. Now, Doug Wilson, we talk about this in the podcast, like he uses a lot of warlike language and just straight up war language. And that's definitely alarming to a lot of people. But as far as I've seen, he has not threatened violence and has said he rejects violence. He wants to win over hearts and minds peacefully, is what he says. Now, that includes taking away a lot of people's rights. So, but he hasn't talked about actual violence.
So these kinds of movements obviously need money. When you track where it comes from, have there been any surprises?
I get this question a lot, especially with like Doug Wilson, like who is the puppet master behind him? And unfortunately, I have a very disappointing answer, which is I don't know for sure, but I haven't seen any evidence, at least in his case, that there's like some dark money behind him. So, I mean, where is it coming from in general? A lot of these guys, a lot of these guys have shows, have popular streaming shows, and they've got their listeners dropping them crypto money. Not always crypto money, but that's a big thing. So yeah, I mean, like these guys make a lot of money just on their content. That's a big way. I mean, Nick Fuentes is a rich man. He's very popular, especially among young men, and that's pretty alarming.
So where are people listening from? They kind of want demographic breakdown. Are we talking Democrat, Republican, men, women, geolocation, etc.?
Oh, listening to us?
Yeah, listening to the podcast.
Oh, So I don't know. I don't think we have I don't know demographics. I don't think we have that.
We just have kind of locations.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, people have been listening all over the country, which is really cool.
Yeah, it was nationally distributed, and the big cities represented pretty well. New York was in there, LA, Chicago for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Idaho punches way above its
Yep.
weight. So thank you. But yeah, and I mean the last season got over 1 million downloads all over the country, and which was really cool. Yeah. So
Yeah, we worked a distribution deal with NPR, and so if you encountered some of the promotions just through NPR, they were definitely talking about this story, our story.
And I will say I get, I don't have numbers on this, but I get feedback from people who are Republican, Democrat, religious, not religious, but a lot of feedback from clergy asking about this. So yeah, so just anecdotally, I mean, it seemed like a big cross section of people tuned in.
So how many of these extremist movements are built on false narratives about the country's founding as a Christian nation?
So there's an academic who's much smarter than me. She was at Vanderbilt for a while, named Amy Cooter, and I've talked to her for a lot of my reporting, and I think she has a really good term for this. She calls these groups nostalgic groups, and I think that is a big through line with these otherwise sort of disparate groups. They really have an idea of the past, which is based on some fact and probably some selective memory of this sort of ideal time, often in the 50s, where everything was so much better. And I think that's powerful, right? You might disagree with their assessment of that, and we can come up pretty easily with some major problems. But I think that is a real belief, and that is a real driver. And that, coupled with a fear of change, a changing country, being uncomfortable with change. Yeah, that's a powerful influence in these groups.
On the political side, Heath, are you concerned about the movement to invoke another, or leading to the call to invoke another constitutional convention that might, lead to more chaos?
Oh, my concern. I mean, I think that's very unlikely for a lot of like logistical reasons, or sort of political logistical reasons. But it's a growing movement. Yeah, it's a growing movement. I don't think it's very realistic in the near term, to be honest.
You mentioned earlier about the primary election this particular year's, and apparently my Siri's going off. So let me turn that off really quick.
I heard that.
But you said a whole bunch of extremist candidates lost during the primary election. Do you know exactly how many and who they were?
Well, Jimmy's going to help me out here because he's better at this than me. But I think it was 5 of the Gang of 8 lost. And the Gang of 8 is sort of this like hardcore far right legislators. So that was pretty big. But you also had elections where it went the other way. Scott Herndon won his seat back. He's certainly a very far right legislator. There was a race up in, was it in Coeur d'Alene or around Coeur d'Alene? Krista Hazel and
that was District 4 in Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah, in Coeur d'Alene, where the much more moderate Republican got beaten pretty soundly. So yeah, it was a mixed bag. I mean, it was, but there was a concerted effort to knock out the Gang of 8, and they definitely had quite a bit of success there. So
yeah. I would say that Lori McCann was the more moderate Republican Senate candidate up in Moscow area. She lost to Dan Foreman.
Right.
Right. But yeah, Scott Herndon's going to be a big force. He was on Jay back when he was there 2 years ago. Wouldn't surprise me if he's back then, and he wants to eliminate property taxes across the board. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Some of these things are in the the Idaho Republican Party platform.
Yeah, she just said, yeah, eliminating property taxes is one of the newest planks of the Republican Party platform that just passed a couple months ago, along with repealing the 16th Amendment for income taxes as well. So,
And we have time for a handful more, but then we'll wrap.
I've just got a couple more here. This person asks, what is the state of constitutional protections in the country and the state of Idaho, and are they going to hold against this movement?
Oh, that's a broad question. What is the state of constitutional protections in this country? I mean, guess it depends on your perspective. Yeah, I mean, constitutional protections kind of depend on the interpretation of the Supreme Court, if people take it to court. So the Supreme Court certainly had some different ideas about some constitutional protections, but have stopped short of some other ones, like trying, they defended birthright citizenship. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot more things are in question than were 15 years ago. Settled law has not always carried the day at the Supreme Court. So what was the other part of the question?
Oh boy. Oh yeah, I mean, are these constitutional protections going to hold against the extremism movements that we're seeing right now?
It depends if they gain more power. I mean, it kind of depends on the ballot box, really. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, that's kind of where everybody has agency, right? I mean, we still have a democracy. We still get to vote. So we'll see.
Any closing thoughts, Heath? We really appreciate everyone coming out and your time and also helping us kind of really lean into this investigative reporting for this next season. Any thoughts or any nuggets to leave us with?
I'm just to say, I'm excited about this next season that we're working on. It's totally different than the other ones. It's got even like exciting FBI manhunts and car chases and all of that stuff. And you get to hear from some of the people who were involved in that, who I tracked down. So yeah, like I'm excited about this next season. And as I said, we're building the plane in the air. So I appreciate people who have already given to our fundraiser for that. If there are folks out there who would still like to give, we would really appreciate it. That's extremelyamerican.org. And it's got a bunch of information on the podcast too. So it's not just an ask for money. You get to learn a little something too. But yeah, I mean, it's everything's in motion in this country right now. And I mean, one of the exciting and scary things about this reporting is I'm not totally sure where things are going right now. I think we're at a real hinge point. And I know like it's kind of exhausting, like every election is the most important election. Like I feel like that's like beaten into us, but that's kind of the time we're in, where like every next election seems to like feel like the most important one. And like so many things can go so many different ways, and we're so polarized that it's like hard to tell which way it's going to go. So I don't know if that's a hopeful or not a hopeful note, but
let's hear it for these amazing reporters, right?
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it.